In this comparative study, I'll be focusing on the cyberpunk genre through the two films Akira and Blade Runner, exploring how each film interprets the future based on the geographical cultural context within the cyberpunk genre. The justification of these two films being chosen is due to the crucial role they play in popularizing and defining the cyberpunk genre across different geographical cultural contexts. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner and Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira both exemplified the cyberpunk genre through the filmic elements of mise-en-scène, color, and sound design, offering a unique interpretation of the future based on their different cultural and geographical contexts. Otomo's depiction of the dystopian future in Akira was influenced by the societal unrest and political instability in the late 1960s and 1970s of Japan. On the other hand, Scott was inspired by the cultural context surrounding anxieties and fears people had of technology, the influx of immigration occurring in the United States, and anxieties over the power of corporations in 1980s America. Set in a futuristic dystopia world, often depicted by its vibrant neon signs, rainy weather conditions, flying cars, cybernetic implants, and megacorporations ruling society, the cyberpunk genre is a science fiction subgenre focused on the integration of society and technology in a dystopian setting. Originating in the 1960s and 70s, the cyberpunk genre broke conventional sci-fi tropes such as optimistic utopias. Directors opted for dystopian near futures where technology had advanced too far, and nations as we knew them ceased to exist. Adapted from Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Blade Runner takes place in a dystopian future of 2019 Los Angeles. The main character, Deckard, is a retired private detective known as the Blade Runner, who hunts down illegal androids called replicants. He is called out of retirement to hunt down 4 replicants that have escaped their off-planet colony and come to Earth in order to prolong their limited lifespan. Conversely, Akira takes place in a dystopian future of 2019 in Neo Tokyo in the aftermath of World War III, where Tokyo had been destroyed. The story follows the main character of Shotaro Kaneda, the leader of the biker gang, and his close friend Tetsuo Shino. After an encounter with a mysterious being, Tetsuo is abducted by the government to be tested on. In an attempt to save Tetsuo, Kaneda joins an anti-government activist group and discovers the secrets of the dystopian world. A prominent film element within Akira and Blade Runner is the use of mise-en-scène, more specifically semiotics and iconography. This element reveals how both films have differing cultural attitudes towards interpreting the future within the cyberpunk genre. The opening shots of Blade Runner begins with a series of wide panoramic shots revealing a dark and brooding cityscape of Los Angeles. These extreme wide shots establish the high-tech and advanced city of the film's futuristic setting, with set design elements such as flying cars, high-tech pyramids, and an abundance of high-rise-like structures across the vast, never-ending landscape. Contrasting to the illusion of high-tech and societal advancement, later shots reveal the reality of how the majority of people in Blade Runner live on a daily basis. The most luxurious or technologically advanced buildings are located at the higher levels of society, where only the rich and powerful can enjoy. However, the poor reside on the lower levels of society, living in the crowded and underdeveloped streets, a stark contrast to the advancement in the higher levels of society. The use of mise-en-scène visually depicts the hierarchical settings within Blade Runner, conveying the themes of high-tech, low-life within the cyberpunk genre. Throughout the film, there are many inferences towards Asian culture, showcased by the iconography of neon signs with Japanese and Chinese characters, a diverse cast including many Asian characters, as well as Asian imagery from billboards. These inclusions not only add towards the diverse and globalized atmosphere of the futuristic setting, but also addresses the concerns of expanding globalization and multiculturalism in 1980s America, serving as a societal critique within the cyberpunk genre. From 1980 to 1988, there was a sustained wave of Asian immigration, leading to a 70% increase in the Asian population of the United States, exceeding historical levels of migration at the time. Furthermore, growth of Asian economies such as China led to concerns regarding job security within the US, leading to societal instability regarding the shift in balance of economic power in the world. Similarly, Akira also evokes the high-tech versus low-life aesthetic through its mise-en-scène, more specifically through the surrounding semiotics and iconography. The societal hierarchy in Neo Tokyo, similar to Blade Runner, is divided based on where they live, where the upper class would live in the towering skyscrapers, whilst the lower class lived on the overcrowded and densely populated streets. Additionally, the various settings within Neo Tokyo creates an impression of a superficially glamorous depiction of the future. However, when looking closely into each setting, the cityscape is covered in trash, whilst the walls are stained by graffiti. The iconography of graffiti and trash act as a visual symbol of the societal decay and underlying societal instability, juxtaposing the supposed societal and technological advancements in the world of Akira. In parallel with the future, Otomo's deliberate utilization of semiotics and iconography mirrors the societal unrest and political instability in the late 1960s and early 1970s Japan. The events ongoing at the time, such as student demonstrations, bikers, political movements, gangsters, homeless youth, heavily influenced Otomo, inspiring him to project these elements into Akira's future as science fiction. Another common element featured in both films and heavily utilized in the cyberpunk genre are their respective use of color theory, which reveals how both films represent different interpretations of the future across different geographical cultural contexts. Throughout Blade Runner, blue is repeatedly used and associated with neon signs and advertisements across various settings of Blade Runner. Throughout the streets and low levels of society, blue neon signs advertising shops and food stalls cover the streets. Additionally, the giant billboard of the higher levels of society also consists of blue lights and hues. The blue hues in Blade Runner create a cold and sterile environment, representing the dehumanizing and artificial environment created from the influence of corporate control and extreme capitalism. Blade Runner's use of color symbolism reflects the cultural context of rising corporate powers and the resulting income inequality. In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan implemented an economic policy known as Reaganomics. His policy involved cutting taxes to incentivize production and thus theoretically decreasing unemployment and increasing domestic spending. However, this led to a rise of corporate power, which caused great income inequality between wealthy corporations and the middle and lower class. The future Scott portrays mirrors the anxieties people had surrounding the rise of corporate power, as well as the subsequent income inequality affecting the middle and lower classes. For example, in education and training areas, existing programs are targeted to help low-income youths and families. However, a cut in taxes will reduce funding for these programs, reducing the opportunities lower class and middle class citizens have access to. This is also reflected through the use of contrasting colors of blue versus yellow and the mise-en-scène element of costuming to underscore the socioeconomic economic divide in Blade Runner. In the scene where Sebastian visits Alden Tyrell, Scott briefly showcases Tyrell's wealth to demonstrate the economic disparity in the future portrayed in Blade Runner. Alden Tyrell is a mastermind behind the Tyrell Corporation, which manufactures artificial life forms including the replicant and android animal. In Tyrell's home, Scott specifically creates an intimately candlelit environment through predominantly yellow and warm hues of light, representing Tyrell's obsession with wealth and money. In addition to light, he uses the mise-en-scène elements of Tyrell's costume, which is a luxurious robe, as well as the abundance of commodities in his possession to further emphasize his wealth and luxurious lifestyle. In contrast to Tyrell, this specific scene depicts citizens of a lower economic class attempting to steal parts off of Detective Deckard's car. These characters are placed in a cold, dimly lit setting with a predominantly blue hue, in direct contrast to Tyrell's home. The thieves are also wearing tattered and worn-out clothing that is very bulky, which reflects their ostracized status in society. The utilization of these contrasting complementary colors of blue versus yellow, often associated with external conflict, creates a visual dichotomy that highlights the divide between these socioeconomic classes. While yellow symbolizes possession of wealth, the cold, melancholic blue symbolizes the struggles of those in lower socioeconomic positions as well as the isolation they may face from society, emphasizing their subordinate status. The specific use of contrast between yellow and blue, as well as the mise-en-scène element of costuming, clearly depicts the socioeconomic divide within the world of Blade Runner, mirroring the struggles of those in lower economic classes during the 1980s in America. On the other hand, red holds great prominence in Akira as a symbol of revolution and rebellion against the oppressive systems in Neo-Tokyo. When Canada is first introduced at the start of the film, he is seen standing at a bar in front of an illuminated arcade machine wearing an all-red jumpsuit. The red jacket worn by Canada throughout Akira was likely inspired by James Dean's jacket in the film Rebel Without a Cause. The intertextuality between the jumpsuit and the red jacket lies in their symbolic representation of rebellion and nonconformity. Through costuming and color theory, the color red in the context of both films are used to convey strong emotions such as anger, passion, and defiance. In the case of James Dean, it was used to convey the inner turmoil and rebellion of Dean's character within the film. Similarly, Canada's red jumpsuit echoes the symbolic meaning of rebellion, whilst glorifying the symbol through Canada's acts of revolution against government bodies throughout the film. Otomo's intentional use of costuming and color theory mirrors the rebellious youth of 1970s and 1980s Japan. More specifically, Canada's character mirrors the events taking place in the Zengakuren movement, where a rise of left-wing sympathizers formed the now well-known Zengakuren movement, where socialist students aimed to challenge the existing political and social order of Japan. Due to the social instability at the time, these events inspired Otomo to depict a dystopian society full of rebellion and resistance against the government. As a subgenre of science fiction, cyberpunk films share the same characteristics with other sci-fi films in terms of sound design, utilizing soundscapes that originate from reality then expands the imagination on this basis. Through the use of sound design techniques encompassing both diegetic ambient sounds and non-diegetic scores, these films are able to amplify the cyberpunk world building of the future dystopian worlds they portray, as well as mirror the cultural context at the time. Blade Runner is known for its use of conventional science fiction sound design techniques, such as using electronic synthesizers and amelodic sounds in order to convey an otherworldly feeling in this futuristic depiction of LA. Some specific techniques Blade Runner uses to convey this otherworldly feeling is through digital reverberations on top of the diegetic sounds throughout the film. For example, when Deckard conducts a test to determine whether or not Rachel was a replicant, Scott deliberately uses reverberations within this scene to evoke a dreamlike quality to the film.
You're watching television. Suddenly you realize there's a wasp crawling on your arm.
I'd kill it.
Reverberations are also heavily used throughout the film. Quoting filmmaker Andrew Stiller, he comments that heavy reverb implies a huge enclosed hard surface space, creates a mood of mystery and paranoia, indicating that the use of reverb makes the setting of the film feel larger and more distant. This not only contributes to the world building of this dystopian future depicted within the cyberpunk genre to create an otherworldly setting, but also connects to the cultural context at the time. In 1980s America, the concept of computer phobia arose, where sufferers experience a range of resistances, fears, anxieties, and hostilities when interacting with computers. Many people felt threatened, feeling that you can be replaced by a machine, become a slave to it, or feeling aggressive towards computers. Blade Runner's use of reverberations and conventional science fiction electronic sounds not only creates a mystery and paranoia-filled depiction of the future, but also mirrors the anxieties and fears surrounding the uprising of technology in 1980s America. Akira also utilizes sound design, more specifically diegetic sound, in order to convey glorified depictions of violence and uprising. During the protests in Neo-Tokyo, the diegetic sounds of explosions, gunshots, and haunting religious chants in the background evoke a sense of rebellion, as well as the fears and hopes of the civilians within the dystopian depiction of the future. The inclusion of explosions and gunshots creates a tense atmosphere, adding towards the intensity building up on the screen. The chanting in the background further emphasizes the societal unrest the citizens feel against the oppressive forces of the government portrayed in Neo-Tokyo. Otomo's use of these auditory elements mirror the societal tensions in 1960s and 1970s Japan, more specifically in reference to the Japanese protest movements. Movements such as the Zengakuren movement, Sanrizuka struggle, and the Ampo protests all saw massive civilian participation in the tens of thousands, due to their dissatisfaction towards the Japanese government. The 1960 Ampo protests were enacted by people who disagreed with the revision of the Japan-US Security Treaty. Otomo's use of realistic diegetic sounds in conjunction with the visual mise-en-scène elements of the glorified depictions of uprisings in Neo-Tokyo were directly influenced by the cultural context he experienced in Japan in the 60s and 70s. Through the use of mise-en-scène, color theory, interior and sound design. Otomo and Scott both interpreted the future portrayed in their respective cyberpunk films based on their different cultural contexts in Japan and US. While Otomo's future depicted in Neo Tokyo was mainly influenced by the social instability and protests ongoing in Japan at the time, Scott's portrayal of the future in Blade Runner displays varying cultural contexts such as computer phobia, anxiety surrounding the rise of corporations and economic policies, and Asian immigration into the US.